We're going to start this semester by exploring humorous writing. This has become a genre that is so popular in current culture, and the opportunities to write and have published and submitted and shown all across the internet is humorous writing. So that's how we're going to start. Let's begin this little unit by looking at exactly what humorous writing is. Let's go over this together. Remember that having AI write any of your content is plagiarism, and I have a very narrow view of AI apps, and I think at the core of all AI technology is the following expression. I believe AI is saying that the person cannot learn, cannot write, has no ability to form a sentence, a concrete thought, to research anything, to write anything, and therefore AI technology must be used to create that content for the person. I find that personally offensive. I know I thought myself about using AI technology to work a math problem. I thought that myself. But here's the thing, down in my little tiny toe, where reality lives, where the truth lives, I would still know that I had deemed myself incapable of learning, incapable of figuring out the answer to a problem. And I don't cotton well to that myself. Still, we will maintain the district policy that anything created by AI technology that you submit as your own work is plagiarism. Now, let's move on to this assignment, which is so much fun that I can't imagine you would want to plagiarize it. But let's look together. What we do is study this humorous writing and what that is. Want to write humorous pieces of fiction? We need to find out what humor actually is. And so this is a very short PDF that explains information and has some links. You can see how these other categories have been written about. Humor writing is nonfiction or fiction that expresses a purpose of being funny. Now, how are you going to be funny? The funny comes from you as a person, you as an individual, your life experiences, your opinions, your encounters with other people on this planet, your encounters with plants and animals and the planet as a whole. All of that is what is available to you for your resources. Now, of course, you can write nonfiction documentary things that you can research, but for this assignment, for this particular study of humorous writing, we're going to look at you and your experiences. So we are going to be using these three types. Remember, you'll see this on the midterm exam, so make sure you study this page. We're going to use short fiction, and we're going to use a little piece of fiction that's 1,000 words or less, and you are going to use you as the subject matter for the humorous writing. So the first thing is to identify your style of humor. Remember, AI has no humor. AI has no personality. You do. You are a human being with experiences and personality. So we want to identify your style. How do you do that? By writing. You did that little introductory assignment for the course where you learned how you learn. And now this experience is going to show you to learn how you express yourself. And that is called your style. And we learn that by writing. I have a very distinct style, and you will too. So this is observational, anecdotal, which is what we're using for this assignment. The dark or gallows humor, where you kind of see the humor in some dark things, but we're not doing that for this assignment, but you can later. Self-deprecating humor, I've never found that to be funny. It's where I am really hard on myself. I make fun of myself. I say self-defacing things about myself. Some people use that humor. I don't think it's funny. Satirical humor is funny, and that is where it's a fun thing to explore. And we always want to remember the rule of three. Everything comes in threes. A description should have three elements. Dialogue should come in threes. I say something, they say something back, I say something, move back to the narrative. So the rule of three is something to remember in all writing, not just narrative writing. And then we have some quick tips. And there's some exercises here that you might want to do, but let's go on now and look at the assignment that we will be writing about for this course. In writing, I'd like for you to see what other people whose work has been published have written. So I want you to click on this, and I'll show you together exactly what this is. It's very, very quick. And we're only looking for the things in this center column. And I want you to find any of these that make you laugh, that you think are funny or clever. And if you find something that you think is funny or clever, simply click on that person's name and you'll find more information and more quotes from that person. This is how you develop your style, not by copying what somebody else does, but by appreciating what a classical published author has approached humorous writing with in order to determine how you are in that same avenue as that person. That's it. This won't take you 10 minutes to go through and look at humor that you think is funny. Now, the next thing, click on this link, and this link will show you works that have been published. And this will give you an idea and a feel for what the marketplace is like, where you want to create your style. So let's look at that together really quick. Humorous short stories that have been published. There are categories if you'd like to find those categories. Let's say I'm looking for contemporary and I see a story, a title interests me. The title is always the thing. And I'm going to read the story. I just need for you to read 3 of them just to give you a feel for what is in the current climate, in the current marketplace for contemporary short stories, humorous writing. Now let's look at the assignment. His instructions and the example that I provided. Okay, 1 PDF that includes name, course date, word count, upper left corner. The essay title, remember the title is so important, and then the title image. No cartoons, words, or logos. This needs to be a picture of a person, your protagonist, preferably you, but it doesn't have to be you. It can be anyone that's the age and looks enough like you that it would be passable. I have often wanted to use one of my photos from my scrapbooks, but some of those are so blurry, they're so dark, and not even with an app can I correct them. The picture needs to be pristine, clear, sharp, and draw the reader into the story. So that eliminates some of my personal scrapbook pictures because they're just not going to fit the bill. The essay is to be in Times New Roman 12 font. Remember, your title font can be anything you like, but the essay itself should be about 800 words. Less than 500 words will not be acceptable. It's to be in Times New Roman 12 font and double spaced. The title can be in any font you like. Remember, any submission that is not double spaced and in Times New Roman 12 font will be rejected. Check and double check this. And then, although the point of view exercise is to explore yourself, your life as a humorist, if you cannot think of a single event from your life, you can email me and request a specific fictional character. I've never seen that required, but I want to make sure that we have all bases covered. Now let's follow it's so much more fun when you write about yourself. Follow this exact same formula. First, think of a situation in your life that makes you laugh when you think back on it. Oh my gosh, the humanity of people living their lives. This does not have to be anything catastrophic or huge. You can see in the example that I've given below, my story is based on one single tiny little life event. So it can be something that was cataclysmic. It doesn't have to be. But it's something that when you think back on it, it makes you laugh. And next, stick with that story. I know you're going to think, oh my gosh, I could have written about this. I could have written about that. And you can do that later. But for this assignment, for this course, stick with your idea and let's go with that. You don't have time to change your mind. So stick with whatever story you've come up with. Now, think of a title, and you may recraft this title later because the title is so important. Be clever, 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 clever with the title. Then find a title image, and I've written instructions about that title image. We've already gone over that. Now, we're going to write this story inductively. That means we're going to start with one tiny little detail, and we're going to build out from that detail. So we're going to start by showing the reader the focus of one small detail, and then as the story progresses, we move out from that detail. So what you want to do is write out the story. I sit down usually with my phone and I will create a note, whatever document I want to do, and I just dictate to it. I just tell the story. Or I can sit down with Word and use the dictation with Word. Sometimes I really want to type because typing for me is very visceral and I can type as fast as I can think. So that's sometimes the way that I write. But other times I just sit down and dictate this story. And then I'm going to edit that, of course, as I go through. It's going to act as an outline for the story where I'll take some parts of it, some parts I won't use. Okay, so once we have that, now we're ready to get started. So we're going to look over this written story and find one tiny detail to begin the story. And we're going to start with sentence number 1. It should be exactly this format. Describe the detail using at least 3 descriptive words. Remember that rule of 3. You can play with language here if you like. For example, my mother used to look down at me with my signature polka dot bow tie, shake her head and say this phrase. You all can say that much better than I can, I'm sure. Do you see this? Doesn't matter whether or not I know the language. You described to me the mother shaking her head, looking down from a position on high, and I already see that the mother is probably thinking, oh my goodness, what do we have here? Now, sentence number 2. Write 2 sentences that explain that detail. Why is this bow tie important? For me, down in the example, why is the little swimming cap important? What is the significance of that? You see how we're taking that one little detail and we're moving a little bit out from it. So we're having 2 sentences that explain that detail. If you use another language for any part of that description, for these 2 sentences, you'll need to show the translation. You're moving out from this one small detail. For example, I first saw a bow tie at the funeral home where my grandfather, whom I had not met, was in a casket wearing a dark blue suit and a large bow tie. I looked at him through the eyes of a lonely 4-year-old boy and longed to meet this elaborate man who lay so still, holding all the secrets of a family I did not know. Okay, so something like that. Sentence number 4. Look back over your story and make some choices. Who are the key players in your story? I have dictated stories to myself before where I had 20 characters in there. Well, we don't want 20 characters. We're only writing 800 words. So we don't have time or space to let the reader know about 20 people. So keep it narrowed down to a couple of people that are the key focuses of the story. You'll see that when we go over the example in a second. Okay, so sentence number 4 introduces those characters in a very clever and creative way, with or without dialogue, but I introduce the mother and do it in that way. Sentence number 5. Now we jump to the occurrence that is the little detail of the sentence. Something's happening in this story. Everything was normal in this story until what happened. And in this case, what happened is going to be something charming, something about you, and So we're jumping to that incident. That's sentence number 5. We're still in this first paragraph, the introduction. Sentence number 6. This is going to be the theme of your story. What is the point of this story? What did you learn, you, the protagonist? What did you learn that makes this story relevant to the reader? And now, after we've finished this first paragraph that is going to be 6 sentences, you can push it to 7, but don't make the introduction longer than 7 sentences. And that 7 sentence would be if one is a really short sentence or something like that. Now we're ready to move on to the story. And the induction has allowed the reader, now the reader cares for that protagonist. I care about them. I've seen this one little detail of their life, and I'm interested to know more. So as we move on to the story, remember everything in the story comes back to that theme, the thesis. What is the story about? Paragraph number 2 then, after that introduction, 6 to 7 sentences. Set the stage for the event that happened. Remember, you are loyal to your reader. The reader doesn't know anything unless you tell them. They don't know where they are. They don't know what the landscape looks like. They don't know if it's raining. They don't know if it's summer. They don't know if it's winter. They don't know what color hair the protagonist has. They don't know anything until you tell them. Now, for this paragraph, number 2, you have 6 to 7 sentences to tell them exactly what they need to know to be able to be in the story with the protagonist. That includes descriptions, similes. Similes are things like, she looked like a Mona Lisa. He was a mountain of a man. Do you see that you can use those similes and metaphors to describe? And sometimes those are better than descriptive words. Now, for example, I kept my bow tie collection in a locked box in the closet of my tiny bedroom that I was eternally grateful to have. In this small Mexican town, I knew classmates who had no home at all, and I always appreciated my own space, complete with a twin bed, a brightly colored serape quilt, a dresser, and most importantly, a full-length mirror. In my mind, I was a billionaire. Our little house was situated on a crowded street, right? So now I've moved out from the detail of the bow tie, moved out. Now I'm in the little singular room, and now I move out to the house, and I move out to the street, then I move out to the neighborhood, then I move out to the town or city or wherever my story is located. Do you see that? That is called inductive writing. Now, into paragraph 2, with a hook that makes the reader want to know what happened in this location. You've set up the world of the story. Now, write one little sentence that's a little bitty hook that makes the reader want to learn more. Paragraph 3, 6 to 7 sentences. Now we're going to learn what happened. Do you see that this is the center section of the story? We're now at the very middle of the story. We've started by allowing the reader to care for the protagonist. We've set up the world of the story. Now we're going to indicate what happened. And craft the story's events, because you only have 6 or 7 sentences to say it. So you have to be careful with your words, with your dialogue, with other things that you create. If I use the actual dialogue that I have in talking with friends, I would bore the reader to tears. So I want to make sure that I keep dialogue exactly as it happened without any of the frills, and make sure that it always goes back to that theme of learning a lesson. Now, paragraph 4, and then. I know, you think, gosh, once I've told the event that happened, I'm done with the story. No, you're not done with the story, because this is where the theme is displayed for the reader. Not by telling the reader, but allowing the reader to see this protagonist on the journey. So it can be years later, it can be what happened 5 minutes later, it can be whatever, but that is where that goes. And then the last paragraph is where you bring it all home. It can be a full circle moment, something that happened in the future after the event, now that you have children of your own, whatever. But here is where the reader gets the full payoff. The theme is now evident without telling the reader. So it just goes to show that you should never, don't do that. Don't tell the reader what they should know. Show them what the protagonist knows. And there should be a lovely moment that you have with the reader at the end, a charming moment where you leave the story without telling the reader what they needed to learn, but by showing what you learned, what the protagonist learned. Okay, now let's look at the example that I wrote. And this is not the picture of me. I have a picture of me that's adorable, but it's so dark and so blurred, and it's a black and white picture, and I'm not going to use it. And this one looks enough like me that I'm going to use this. Okay, so this is my little story, and these are the first 6 sentences, and I numbered them so you can see how those sentences played out just in the introduction. I loved my little swimming cap. Actually, I adored my entire collection. You see this little piece of punctuation? The fun thing about narrative writing is that you get to play with punctuation. Now that we know how to use punctuation, which of course is a prerequisite for the course, it's fun to play around with punctuation. I do it all the time. Sometimes people use the ... Sometimes people use brackets. They use all kinds of punctuation. I use punctuation to show pauses. I love to use punctuation. And it's a very creative part of the process. The one I insisted on wearing around the house and certainly in the bathtub was a little rubber blue cap with pink and yellow daisies on the side. I wore my swim caps on family vacations in or out of the pool as a fashion statement. I loved the glamorous Gibraltar Hotel, not the usual motor hotels of West Texas. So now in that sentence, I show you where we are. We're in Texas. So the reader didn't know at the first where we were, and by sentence number 3, I tell them where we are. When our family stayed at this particular hotel on our summer vacations, I wore my most special bathing cap, the one my grandmother, the beauty queen of Electra, Texas, bought me that was beige with rainbow-colored rubber fringe. This summer, I was determined to dive into the swimming pool and make my debut as a future Olympian. I thought I was the height of beauty, and I was just 3 years old. Being in stylish vogue was so much simpler then. There's your theme. Being in stylish vogue. And so I go up here to where I had written down the theme. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And so that is where I have that. Now I go, I loved the swimming pool experience. Being in stylish vogue was so much simpler. Okay, I loved the swimming pool experience, and the Gibraltar Hotel was the family favorite. It was a long drive from Wichita Falls to Paris, Texas. On the way, we'd always stop in Honey Grove, where Davy Crockett camped on his way to the Alamo. Aunt Fanny and Uncle Leroy's East Texas friends, Thelma and Shorty, lived 9 miles south of Paris in Glory, Texas, and we would go to visit. Glory had a population of 50, and it remains the only spot in Lamar County with 2 cemeteries nearby. The long drive from West to East Texas was made bearable by the fact that we would soon be in the vintage 1915 Grand Hotel, where we would get in our swimsuits and hit the pool. It was heavenly. Later, we would go to the movies at the Plaza Theater, and I would dream my dreams of stardom. Those dreams would carry me through 3 days of living room miserable chat sessions that never seemed to end. The salvation of a vivid imagination for enduring tedious family obligations was so much simpler then. Everything wraps back to that theme. And it was at that very pool near the Texas border that I decided it was time for me to learn to dive. My big sister was so graceful and could swan dive like Esther Williams. I wanted to do it too. So when I was 3.5, I had my sister stand guard by the side of the diving board, and my dad was treading water just under the board. In my powder pink swimming cap, I dived like a pro, as half the water went up in the pool went up my nose. I'm sure I looked ridiculous trying to be graceful, but I didn't care. I was ready to do it again. One night during a light spring shower, my dad let my sister and me swim in the pool during the gentle summer drizzle. I can't think of anything I considered more quixotic than swimming in the rain. Being fearless and knowing that I could accomplish anything was so much simpler then. I saw myself at the pool recently. I was swimming laps, and while heaving breathlessly on the side of the pool, I watched a swim class for babies. The instructor was cautioning parents not to shame their children when they cried, but just to encourage them. One little tow-headed toddler in a white swim cap listened to the teacher and then rolled her eyes up to look at her father. He smiled down at her, and I knew exactly what they were thinking. She was going to be the star of that class, and there would certainly never be a tear shed from her eyes. I watched that determination on her sweet face and saw myself learning to swim with my father, knowing that I would make him proud. I reflected on the simplicity of small acts of bravery that allowed my dad to connect with me with loving approval. Happiness, self-esteem, and joy came at such a low price when I was young. Maybe it was West Texas itself with uncomplicated people who learned to handle barren landscape and hot humidity with straightforward values, finding contentment and the grandiosity of amethyst gold sunsets in a single five-star hotel. These days, the Gibraltar has been replaced by Motel 6, and Paris has added a metal replica of the Eiffel Tower with a giant red cowboy hat on top. Glory, Texas now has a population of 58 and a Starbucks. Time has marched on. Today, as I spend $379 at the makeup counter trying to overcome the ravages of time and gravity, I remember how easy it used to be to feel pretty and austere, oblivious to awkward social self-consciousness. Those wonderful years when the effort was its own reward, and pondering the smell of a magnolia tree blossom was awe-inspiring. I long for the days when I just put on my little swimming cap and jumped in the water, basking in the certainty that I was always bobbed back up to the top. It was all so simple then. Okay, so that's an example of how you want to write this story. Now, you will have your own style. You may include dialogue. You'll notice that there's really no dialogue in my story. I have written many stories that do include dialogue, and maybe you want dialogue for your story. But we don't want to drone on and on and on with senseless, meaningless dialogue. You only have 800 words. We're not writing the great American novel here. So make sure that you take your time with this and honor yourself with a piece of writing that you are proud of, and see if this is a genre that you like, that you think you might want to write some more with. Later on in the semester, you'll have 2 more experiences to practice the kind of literature that you've studied, and this is the first. So enjoy. Be sure to check, double check, make sure that this is Times New Roman 12 font and that it is double spaced. Everybody gets 1 submission. Make sure it's your very best effort.